Why isn't it good? Hi, I'm Caroline Leavitt. I'm the co-founder of A Mighty Place, the book initiative that was begun right when the stupid pandemic began to help independent bookstores who had their doors shuttered, to help authors who had their tours taken away, and to help readers who are looking for new things. We have, today is really special because we have someone I absolutely love. Eleanor Brown. She is a wonderful, wonderful author, and we're going to be talking about her book, What's Any Other Family by Eleanor Brown. And I want to say I first met her at a book festival many, many years ago. And the best thing about that festival is we both walked into dinner starstruck, because we had just made the New York Times bestseller list. And I saw Eleanor again a few years later at the Pulpwood Queens Book Festival, where the theme was circus, remember? And I was so freaked out because we all had to dress like clowns. And there was Eleanor in this gorgeous costume. And it was just so much fun to see her. And I'm so happy she's here. And I can't wait to talk to her about her book. So let me give you her introduction. Let me just open this up. So I can read it. Eleanor Brown is the New York Times #1 international best-selling author of 3 novels. This one, Any Other Family, which is wonderful. Go to bookshop.org or your favorite indie bookseller and buy it. If you have any questions for Eleanor, put them in the chat. This book it's phenomenal. And plus, look at that cover. But she's also the author of The Weird Sisters and The Light of Paris. Her writing has been hailed by People magazine as creative, original, and delightful, and by Library Journal also. This particular novel has been called a treat of a novel by Minneapolis Star Tribune, one of Real Simple's best books of 2022. The Washington Post's 12 noteworthy books for July and August. Southern Livings reads perfect for summer. Entertainment Weekly, 16 novels we're excited for this summer. Veranda's 12 new book releases you need to read for this summer. And Entertainment Weekly also called it a vivid character study. So I'm thrilled to have Eleanor here. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. I love you. I miss you so much.
I miss you. I miss you more, I think. Okay. So anyway, I'm dying to talk about this book.
Yeah.
So Any Other Family is about open adoption. And if you don't know, open adoption believes, and I believe this too, and so does Eleanor, that it's what's best for the child is to know where they came from, who is the birth parent, who is the parent raising them. And if all these parents can have a relationship together, it's truly ideal. Any Other Family is about 3 sets of parents who adopted 4 biological siblings, committing to keeping these children connected after the death of their grandmother. But when the birth mother announces that she's pregnant again, these women must decide who's going to adopt this new baby and why. How will this work? What do these people owe each other? So the first question I wanted to ask you was about your origin story that gave birth to this novel. So tell us where this novel came from, because it's a great, exciting, wonderful story.
It is a great, exciting, wonderful story. So 4 years ago, February 15th, 2018, it was like 9 o'clock at night. My husband and I were watching the Olympics in South Korea. And I got a call from my OBGYN. And my OBGYN doesn't usually call me at 9 o'clock at night. And I hadn't seen her in like a year. So there was no reason she should call me. And she said, hey, listen, I had a woman come in for her annual exam yesterday. And it turns out she's 6 months pregnant and she didn't know it. And she wants to make a plan for adoption. Do you want a baby?
It's amazing.
I don't nobody has ever called me and offered me another human being in my entire life. So
were you looking into adoption a lot?
We weren't. My husband and I had wanted kids, but we hadn't had them for multiple reasons. So it really was this, she was just like, you were the first people we thought of. And it was this kind of miraculous lightning strike. And we were a little wary because we weren't looking to adopt. But we met my son's birth mother and his birth father, and we just all kind of fell in love. And 3 months later, there we were in the delivery room while our son was being born. And you know, like you said, we have an open adoption, which is not always possible or recommended, but in our case, it works very well thus far. And we do feel really, you know, strongly that we'd like him to have a relationship with his birth family. Um, and people just had a lot of questions when I would tell them this, because I feel like people really still are stuck in that idea that adoption is secret,
Right, right,
closed, right?
right.
And then I had a lot of questions too, because I was thrust into this family I hadn't been expecting. And so that's kind of what gave rise to Any Other Family.
What surprised you the most about the open adoption? What was one of the unexpected benefits?
Um, I'm trying to think of, I don't know, we were really well prepared. So one of the things I say is that like adoption is really different than pregnancy, for better or for worse, right? You know, if you say, I'm pregnant, then people say, congratulations. And when are you due? They don't say, well, what makes you think you'll be a good parent? And why do you want
People
kids?
said that to you?
Well, I mean, that's kind of what you're asked when you adopt, right? I mean, you
Right,
have to
right.
be interviewed by social workers and judges, and you know, you have to go through training, and nobody does that when you have a kid biologically.
That's right. That's right.
So it's
Did
go ahead.
Go ahead. No, 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 I want you to go ahead.
So I was gonna so like we had to answer all these questions. We had to think through this really clearly before it started. So I don't know how much surprise there has been, because we spent so much time thinking about it.
I
But also, let me
know.
say, we're only 4 years into this, right? We have a
Right.
long way to go. And at some point, it's going to get, you know, more complex.
Did did you have to do the whole scrap? I know, like after we had Max, we tried to open Adopt, as I told you before this, and they made us do this scrapbook.
The book,
It's like
yeah.
it's a very writerly thing where you have to create a picture of this is us in front of our home. We love having guests, or this is, you know, our neighborhood house of worship or whatever. And it felt so weird to do that. And the birth mothers I spoke to hated those notebooks. They
Yeah.
sort of knew that it wasn't real. Do they
Right.
still do that? I mean,
They
did you
do
have to
still
do
do
that?
that. Now, we didn't have to do that because what we were doing is called designated adoption, where we
Yeah,
were
what
already
is that? What is
connected, like
right? Oh,
with the
right,
birth
right.
family.
Okay.
So we didn't have to go through that sort of application process, but I do talk about that in the book. And the birth mother actually talks about how much she hates them and how much she hates that process, because it's so weird to think that like
It's weird.
you're kind of, and this is one of the things that I really wanted to explore in the book. It's a very weird thing to have to look at someone and say, would you be a good parent? Would you
You
be a
don't
good
know.
child? Like, who gets to decide that? Who gets to choose, you know?
Right, exactly. And how do you know? You don't know until you're doing it. I mean, to me, motherhood was a surprise after surprise after surprise.
Yeah.
So you have all these different mothers here: Tabitha, single mother Ginger, Elizabeth. And I thought you made a really smart decision to showcase a variety of mothers adopting different kids into one family. Can you talk about the different mothers and how and why you created them, and what you were trying to discover with each of them, and which one is most like you?
That's a lot of questions. So there are the three mothers. There's Tabitha. I describe her as the
Right,
Pinterest mom.
right.
Um, and she, you know, everything has to be perfect, and she wants this family to be so happy and everything to be so wonderful. And she adopted the twins. And then there is Ginger, and Ginger kind of stumbled into adoption, not in the way I did, but I wanted, like you said, I wanted to explore a lot of different ways that people come to adoption, because one of the narratives I think that people have about adoption is like, it's just a couple has fertility issues and adoption is their last resort. And that's not the case at all.
That's
There are
not the
lots
case.
of reasons people
Right.
build their families or expand their families through adoption. So Ginger is kind of like almost represents kinship adoption, where like she already knew Phoebe, who's her daughter, and like Phoebe basically chooses her. Just like I want Ginger to parent me. And then there's Elizabeth, and Elizabeth is the newest addition to the family because she
Right.
adopted the baby, who's the newest addition to the family. And so she's going through the whole experience of parenting an infant, which of course is an adventure
in
in
itself.
itself.
Yeah.
And I also, the other thing with Elizabeth that I wanted to do is that I really kind of wanted to write about female anger, because I feel like that's not something that we talk about a lot in society. It's not an emotion that that people who are raised as women are like allowed to express. So I really wanted to kind of explore that. And she's also wrestling with a lot of grief. So I don't know, like which one is most like me, to be honest with you. Probably Tabitha. Like I totally have that Pinterest mom part of it. Like I was texting a friend the night before my son's birthday party this year, because we could finally have a birthday party for him. And I was like, I think I need to make like miniature charcuterie boards for all the kids.
Oh, God.
And she was like, what is wrong with you? So,
that's everything, actually, right with you. Also, so we have all these different points of view of all these characters. How how difficult did that make your process, having to get into all these different headsets? Did you have separate folders for each one, or did they talk to you, or how did that work?
So it was very difficult. I always say like I do these things with my books where it's like if I thought about it ahead of time, I would never do it because it's way too complicated. And with this book, yeah, it was like with the 3 sets of parents and the 4 kids, that's 9 people in the room at all times. And it's like, just the stage management of that is really tricky. Like, where's the baby? Has anybody seen the baby? What did I do with the baby? So there were a lot of color-coded Post-it notes involved. What helped is that I had a really clear idea of who these women were. And as you mentioned, kind of what I wanted to present about adoption through each of them. But, you know, this book is very much about adoption. It's also very much about motherhood and about parenting and about chosen family and about trust, and all of these other things. So I had a really clear idea of who they were, and that definitely helped me manifest it. And I wrote this in Scrivener, which I actually have really mixed feelings about now. I love it.
Oh, you do love it? Oh,
I do love it.
Okay.
And the thing I realized with this book is that it was causing me. So for those of you who aren't familiar, if you just write it like in a Word document or a Google Doc, it's just one long flow, right? Yeah. Scrivener has this sort of, they call it a binder view. So just imagine you can see like each little piece off to the side. And so when you have 3 main characters, that's awesome because you can just jump around. You can look at where they were. And it was also causing me to think in segments like that, right? So we know that technology affects the way we think. And so the next project I started in Word because I was like, I want that flow again. But in any case, I don't even know if that answered your question. But yeah, there was a lot of planning that went into this.
You also you did this remarkable thing that I just loved, where it was almost like letters that prospective adoptive parents were writing about why they wanted to adopt. And also, before you answer the question, I want to say to anybody out there, please, if you have any comments or questions, put it in the chat. Don't forget bookshop.org is where you can buy any of Eleanor's wonderful books at independent bookstores. So tell us about those letters.
Yeah, so my editor calls them interstitials, which I feel like is a terrible name. Like, I want to read a book full of interstitials.
Yeah, what is that?
I don't even, right? It's like, what even is that? So I just say they're excerpts from hopeful adoptive parents. And again, this was kind of like my way of getting at those 2 issues of adoption looks like all kinds of things, right? People are looking to adoption to expand or grow their family for all kinds of reasons. And also this question of like, what makes a good parent, right? Because that is something that people have to decide in adoption. And it's a very strange decision to have to make, you know, and a very strange feeling like when you're in the process of like advocating for yourself and arguing for yourself, especially if like us, we didn't have any other children. So it was like, I don't know, like what would make me a good parent, you know? And you don't know what kind of parent you're going to be until you're in it, right?
Right. Right.
Um,
That's right. No, you have
so
no idea. You have no idea
yeah,
how that's
yeah,
going
and
to work.
it's different than what, like you said, like motherhood is a series of surprises. Parenthood is a series of surprises, and so that was just my goal of trying to get at these two issues. And my hope is that people will have feelings. I tried to make every one of those hopeful adoptive parents have something wonderful about them and something that might give people pause. So I hope that people will have strong feelings about them when they read this.
Yeah, I also wanted to ask if your basic question, what makes a family, could be stretched out to what should a marriage look like, especially a marriage where there is a child.
Yeah.
A lot of times, that's as beautiful and complex as being a mother to a child because you don't know. It's like if it's just been you and your partner and you're circling around each other and then a child is in that mix, you sort of it almost to me it felt like everything like pulled out and it didn't start to come back again really really close until your kid is like 14 or
Yeah.
15 and you're
Yeah,
not needed as much.
it does change it. And that's one of the things that Elizabeth and John are going through in the book, because of course they have Violet, who's not even a year old, I think at the time of the book, or the time the story takes place. And one of the things that Elizabeth is going through is one of the things that I went through, which I think a lot of people go through, which was like discovering this incredible anger towards my husband, who is like the most wonderful, loving, caring. He's an incredible father. He's an incredible partner. But I was just so mad at him all the time. And yeah, it's like we call ourselves like, we're on our son's team, right? Because it's like we trade off stuff, can you put him to bed tonight? Because I want to go to yoga, or, like this is our focus. But it does change your relationship because
It
it
does.
turns into a partnership, like a working partnership, in a way that it's not if you don't have kids.
Yep, exactly. um I know you made a conscious choice not to give voice to the birth mothers
Mm-hmm.
or the birth fathers.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, because the book is so complex and there's so many issues you are going through, you'd have an 8,000 page book. But I
Right.
also wanted to know what else was going in your mind? Like, why didn't you? Or did you think about it and then discard that idea?
Um, Did I think about it? I do remember my editor and I talking about it at some point, but there was again that issue of like, we already have 9 main characters and like
Right.
just too much. And I wasn't trying to write sort of like a holistic guide to adoption, right? It was
Right.
just like, let's raise these issues. I feel comfortable as an adoptive mother writing from that perspective. There are certainly, like, I feel like it's super important for us to let adoptees and birth parents talk for themselves.
Mhm.
Books I always recommend when people ask me about this is Nicole Chung's, and I'm going to screw up the title again. I just screwed up the title yesterday. All You Need to Know, I think.
Oh,
So she was an international adoptee, and she just has a lovely memory about that. But the same thing kind of with birth parents. And I actually specifically did not talk to my son's birth parents about their experience while I was writing the book, because I did not want, like, this is not our family. But
right,
I
right.
didn't want that to color my writing. I did have a number of birth parents read the manuscript after it was done and had them kind of weigh in. But in terms of myths about adoption, because there are a ton of them,
Yeah, tell us about the myths. Tell us about adoption myths.
adoption myths. So I already mentioned one of them, which is like adoption is a last resort. And it's a couple has fertility issues and this is the last thing they try. Not the case. There's only one kind of adoption, which is infant adoption. Not the case.
Not the
There's
case.
foster adoption, there's embryo adoption, kinship adoption, international adoption, all kinds of things. Another thing, and this is a question I got, we were talking before the show started about like rude questions you get, or
Oh,
rude
yeah.
comments you get. And I hear a lot of assumptions about my son's birth parents. Like, oh, they must have been really young. And they actually weren't. They were just not ready to parent. And so I did actually, I rewrote the birth mother in this book so many times because I was trying to add some dimension to her, but I was like, again, this book cannot do everything, right? I'm not here to just tell every myth about adoption. But so she is young when she has first and second pregnancies, but she's older now, but she's still not ready to parent, and maybe she might not ever be. It's something that happens, right? For whatever reason, these people find themselves in situations where they're pregnant, sometimes multiple times, and they're just not ready to parent. And that's okay, because that's what adoption is for. Adoption is not a choice about pregnancy. Adoption is a choice about parenting.
Exactly. We were talking a little bit about this before you came on the show, but I want to talk more about it. It's about the word adoption. I told you that when my husband and I were, after we had Max, we were trying to do an open adoption. A lot of people did not want to choose us because they felt since we had a genetic child, we would never love our child, their child, as much as we loved our child. And those pronouns are weird to me because, as you and I were talking about, even if you're carrying a child in your belly, the child you're carrying becomes out a total stranger. Just as when you adopt a child, the child's a whole person in itself. So I've often thought that the word adopt, maybe we could erase it and just say that it's child, like your child. Do you have thoughts on that? What do you think?
I do think that's another thing about adoption is I feel like one of the things that we learned in our training is that language is so important. And so, and it's important to everybody because of the feelings that are involved. And it's up to every family to find what works for them, right? So when I introduce my son, I don't say this is my adopted son. I say this is my son.
That's your son, of course.
And I don't it's so funny to hear that story because I'm I don't actually physically know if I could love this child anymore. If I had, carried him myself. But so we say things like I hate the term gave up for adoption, especially, whoops, where'd you go?
Oops, my camera just went out. Okay, hold on. I'm going to put it on again. Oh boy. Okay, well, never mind. People can hear my voice. So we'll continue with you, and I will be this all-seeing camera. I'm really sorry. I don't know how to
Here's my cat to make a guest appearance.
Okay, the guest appearance. Sorry about that. Right, so the boy is your son.
Term gave up for adoption, and it's especially untrue with open adoption because his birth family didn't give him up. They're not parenting him, but he is absolutely still their child and he's our child. There's no severing there. So, and that's actually one of the things that this book is really concerned with is there are all these beautiful, complex family relationships that we don't have terms for.
That's right.
So how do we figure that out? One of my son's very good friends, his family, he has this bonus set of grandparents from his father's first marriage. His wife passed away, but her parents are still his grandparents. Do you know what I mean? So it's there's all of these wonderful, wonderful, loving people in your life, and
whoops. Oh, we have technical difficulties. I'm so sorry.
And I'm laughing at my cat who's trying to make an escape.
Oh my God, I am so sorry. We have technical difficulties, but Eleanor is back. I am not, but I am here as a voice, and the cat is here. So I'm sorry. Please tell me what you were saying.
No, I was finishing answering your question about terminology. So I think that we terminology. Right. So we need not to get hung up on kind of what we're calling people and let's just call ourselves family. right? Because
Right.
that's what
Just
we
call it
are, whether
family.
we're chosen,
Right.
marriage or biological, whatever it is, like we're family. Even
Okay,
this
I have
fault.
a question to ask you. How do you think, if you take your characters and you see them 10 years from now, what do you think they're going to be doing?
This is so funny. Like people always ask me, like they asked me this about The Weird Sisters, which was my first novel. Like, would you ever write a sequel? And I'm like, when I am done with a book, I am so done with a book. Like so done with a book. And I don't want to see these people again. I think that fundamentally, I'm very interested in character when I write. But fundamentally, I don't think people change. I think we keep fighting the same battles. We may get better at things, but I think our core issues are always the same. There you are.
Here I am. Okay, great.
Um, and so I think that in some respect, they'll still be having similar conversations, but it's also kind of cool to think about because in 10 years, like the oldest child in this family, and this is actually something I bring up in the book, is like to the oldest child is going to be in her 20s. And so what does that mean? Like if we're raising them as siblings, what does that mean? And at some point, it is always a child, biological or adopted. It's always their choice as to what kind of relationship they want with their family. So like, what are the kids going to choose? And that's the big
Right.
question mark, right? Is that
Right.
like, we just
Right.
don't know what they're going to do. So, I mean, I presume Tabitha will still be trying to overmanage everybody, although maybe she'll be a little bit better about it. And everybody else will be a little bit better about setting boundaries. Like, I think that Elizabeth is really struggling to be an infant parent, but she's going to be an awesome parent to a middle schooler. So she'll be kind of like in her element at that point. But she'll also probably still be angry and annoyed with her husband. So,
Which are all natural and human emotions. I
yeah.
wanted, I wanted to ask you, so what's obsessing you now and why? Beside what's obsessing everybody, like climate change, politics, that kind of stuff.
What's obsessing me now?
Yeah, what's obsessing you now? Are you working on something new?
I'm actually in sabbatical right now. I have a couple of drafts that I needed to get some time away from. Um, I don't know. I think what is obsessing me now? I think probably my kid. He's very into ice hockey, which is like speaking of
Wow.
surprises. Like I never would have guessed this. We were not ice hockey players. Like, um, so I spent a lot of time thinking about how to keep warm because I spend so much time at ice rinks. Um, uh, I don't know what else. I've got a lot going on right now. I actually just have been wrestling with this today of kind of like how to map out what matters to me. And I
Oh
feel like
yeah.
in COVID, like this was my COVID book. I wrote this book in 2020. And so it was such an interesting experience because I was so in it, right? Because I didn't have anywhere else to be. I didn't have anything else to think about. I didn't have anywhere to go. And now it's like all of this is filtering back into our lives. And it's
Right.
like, how did I do this before? How did I sort of like prioritize um what I care about, and allow myself to be obsessed with things again. Right now I'm kind of getting back into the how do I juggle 50 things.
It's hard, and it keeps getting hard, and then I think you learn to love the disaster
Yeah.
aspect of it. I have one last question for you because I'm really interested in this myself, which is you mentioned that you use enneagrams when you write,
Yeah.
and I have a friend, Jeff Lyons, who's a story girl, who taught me the
Yes.
enneagrams, and it just blew me away when I
Yeah.
started using them. So how did you discover them? And if you can talk a little bit about how they worked for you?
How did I discover the Enneagram in
Yeah,
general?
is this something that you knew about? Because I didn't.
Yeah, I discovered it, oh gosh, I don't know, maybe like 7 years ago, 8 years ago, 10 years ago. I don't know, a long time ago. And uh, it just made instant sense to me. Like, so for those of you who don't know, the Enneagram is a personality theory system.
Right.
I compare it to Myers-Briggs because most people like are familiar with Myers-Briggs. I personally, Myers-Briggs never like resonated with me, but the Enneagram did. And
Yeah.
I kind of discovered like the Enneagram is a way into writing, like that, like this is a really interesting way. It kind of maps out someone's journey, and so you can use that to create your character's journey. And then along the way, it turned out it was really helpful for me personally. It was helpful in my relationship.
Yeah.
I'm dying to know, like they say you can't type other people, but I'm dying to know what type my son is.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
you're not supposed to sort of like think about it with them until they're older.
Right. What are you? What number are you?
I'm a 3.
You're 3? I'm a 4.
You're a 4. Of course you're a 4.
Of
Yes,
course I'm a 4.
of course you're a
All right.
4.
So I have a few announcements before we leave. The first announcement is bookshop.org. That is your gateway to any independent bookstore wherever you are. Please buy from independent bookstores. Please buy Any Other Family. It's a wonderful book. The Weird Sisters, or any of Eleanor's books. Second of all, this is going to be a podcast. This is going to live on our YouTube station forever, so you can watch it anytime and write comments. And last of all, I want to profusely thank Eleanor, who I miss like crazy. I hope we will get to meet in person soon so I can give you a hug and I can give your son a hug. And thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm sorry about the technical difficulties, but I'm just blaming COVID for it.
It was just an opportunity for Mimi to shine, which is really
yeah.
nice, so.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll see all of you next week. And Eleanor, we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.